Abandoned in childhood, wounded by violence, dragged into drugs and the streets. Charlotte's life seemed like a road with no return. But then, something unexpected changed everything. A story built on real events, filled with life lessons. Charlotte came into the world marked by absences and wounds she never chose. At just 3 years old, she experienced the abandonment of her own mother, who battled mental illness. The emptiness left by that gesture was filled in a harsh and cruel way. Her father, unable to offer stability, brought home an abusive stepmother who turned each day into a field of humiliation and violence. Childhood, which should have been a refuge of innocence, became a territory of constant fear, where words cut deeper than any physical punishment. Stay with me until the end, because the outcome of this powerful story will surprise you. You'll want to know what happened to Charlotte. And more than that, you'll realize how much this journey is filled with valuable lessons for our own lives. In the end, a hard truth will be revealed. Our society is full of Charlottes, invisible people who carry deep wounds and often find no support to start again. This channel is new. Help us grow on YouTube, leave a like and subscribe so you don't miss the next videos. When Charlotte went to school, she expected to find a safe space, but instead found more labels. Dyslexia made her a target of judging eyes and cruel jokes, while classmates reinforced, through daily bullying, the feeling that she didn't belong anywhere. Yet in the middle of all these imposed limitations, an unexpected discovery arose: Charlotte had high abilities. A contrast that confused her even more, because she felt both inferior and extraordinary, never sure to which extreme she truly belonged. At just 12 years old, the tension at home reached its peak. After fighting back against a brutal attack from her stepmother, she was expelled, thrown out as if she were a disposable burden. Suddenly, the girl who already carried invisible scars was alone, without a home, without direction, wandering between distant relatives, temporary shelters, and moments when darkness seemed to offer more comfort than life itself. It was during this bleak period that she reached the edge of the abyss, ready to end her life on a silent beach, convinced that the world would never miss her. When life loses meaning, many succumb, leaving only silence. But some resist, and Charlotte resisted. Life, at times, insists on writing lines we never planned, and at that moment, something many would call divine intervention changed her destiny. A wealthy family, with resources and stability, reached out and welcomed Charlotte as an adopted daughter. For her, however, the shock was overwhelming. She felt like a misplaced piece in a scene too luxurious, as if she were just a symbol of charity displayed to the world. Still, that new home brought a pause, a brief truce in the storm, allowing her to breathe, to regain part of her strength and rediscover that there was still a future ahead. Even so, unease grew inside her. Comfort didn't heal the wound left by rejection, nor erase the question echoing in her mind: who am I, after all? So, as a teenager, Charlotte decided to leave in search of something greater, an identity that wasn't imposed, a story she could write herself, even if it meant starting over alone once again. With only $600 in her pocket and a heart full of thirst for freedom, Charlotte dove into the vibrant, chaotic nightlife. The clubs became her stage, her school, and her survival ground. She worked wherever she could, danced, met influential people, and gradually built a network of contacts that led her to open a small fashion business. What began as a simple booth at a fair grew too quickly, transforming into a sophisticated boutique that dressed celebrities and supplied costumes for film productions. To outsiders, it looked like a real-life fairy tale of resilience, a meteoric success with no limits. But behind the elegant storefronts and flashes of glamour, a dark reality hid. Charlotte was trapped in an abusive marriage, marked by manipulation and betrayal that eroded her self-worth day after day. The shine of her business couldn't brighten the shadows of her personal life, and unresolved pain pushed her toward a dangerous refuge: cocaine. At first, the drug seemed to numb her emotional wounds, but soon it became an abyss from which escape was impossible. The spiral was brutal and swift, from cocaine to crack, from the elegance of fashion backstage to the cold streets of the city. Charlotte began sleeping in tunnels, wandering aimlessly, selling whatever she could to secure the next rock. Each night was a gamble, each sunrise a game of Russian roulette against her own life. The woman who once dressed stars now hid in the shadows, invisible, broken, yet still breathing. It was in this setting of despair that fate dealt her another cruel blow. In a luxury apartment belonging to a powerful figure, a near-fatal episode changed everything. Charlotte was stabbed, her blood staining the floor as a brutal reminder of how far she had fallen. Rushed to the hospital, her body battled between life and death. On the operating table, she felt herself leaving her own body, watching from outside the fragility of her existence. 3 days in a coma, 3 days hovering between two worlds, until suddenly, she opened her eyes. But waking up didn't bring salvation. She returned to the same starting point, the streets. Life had given her another chance, but the question remained, what would Charlotte do with it? That was when what many would call an invisible hand appeared, an unexpected benefactor, someone who chose to believe in her when almost no one else did. This support funded her entry into a rehabilitation program, where Charlotte took her first steps toward a life away from drugs. Yet the road was far from straight. She wavered between periods of sobriety and painful relapses, as if every victory was followed by a stumble pulling her back to the beginning. In the midst of this instability, she let herself be drawn into risky choices. She began working in drug sales at a hotel, desperate for a quick way to survive. But the price was high. She was arrested, facing the real possibility of a long sentence that could erase any chance of a new beginning. Behind bars, surrounded by cold and loneliness, Charlotte received news that changed everything. She was pregnant. The life inside her became the spark that redefined her priorities. The judge, moved by her situation, granted her a rare opportunity. Instead of serving her sentence in a regular prison, she was sent to a strict mother and child program under constant supervision. It was her last chance to prove she could rewrite her story. When her daughter was born, healthy and full of life, Charlotte felt she had finally found an undeniable reason to stay standing. From that moment, her fight gained new meaning. Working minimum-wage jobs, enduring exhausting shifts and responsibilities larger than her strength, she supported herself and her daughter as a single mother. Temptations still lingered, the ghosts of depression still tried to return, but for the first time, Charlotte stayed away from drugs. Each clean day was a silent victory, each night without relapse a testimony that, despite all her scars, she could still write a different story. Seeking something greater than just survival, Charlotte found an unexpected refuge in Alcoholics Anonymous, a space where broken stories intertwined and, paradoxically, grew stronger. There, she discovered a spiritual path that went beyond the meetings, a thread of faith that helped her rebuild not only her sobriety but also her soul. Each gathering was like holding a lantern in the dark, reminding her she was not alone on this journey. Determined to heal fully, she began to care for her body as well. She adopted a disciplined diet, sought medical treatment, and underwent tests that, to everyone's surprise, revealed remarkable improvements. Her body, once ravaged by excess and abuse, responded with unexpected vitality, as if life itself, in a generous gesture, was offering her a second chance. With these steps forward, something inside her began to bloom, a sense of belonging, the restoration of self-love, and the discovery of a purpose greater than her own pain. Charlotte no longer saw herself only as a survivor, but as someone capable of turning her story into a living example of hope. She began giving back little by little. At first, she helped behind the scenes, organizing, serving coffee, supporting the logistics of meetings, always quietly, always humbly. But gradually, her presence began to radiate confidence and inspiration. What started as small gestures of support soon became a bigger mission, standing alongside those still struggling in the dark, offering not just words, but living proof that it was possible to come back to life. With almost nothing in her pocket, she took her daughter by the hand and crossed the sea. Puerto Rico welcomed her with the smell of salt, the constant sound of waves, and an ancient intuition of belonging. "This is home," she repeated, as she rented simple rooms, shared kitchens, fixed whatever was broken. There was no luxury, but there was purpose, waking up each day, working with what she had, and being grateful for whatever came. The first breath of change appeared in an unlikely encounter, a diver, exhausted, living with the consequences of hepatitis, in need of care, listening, and rhythm. Charlotte adjusted her diet, organized schedules, kept up with medical appointments, brought breath and routine. Within weeks, signs of recovery began to show. Word of mouth, quiet yet persistent, started spreading across the island. Someone was helping lost souls find their center again. People came from dirt floors, executives came in silence, artists arrived, even billionaires with empty eyes, all sat at the same table, ate the same simple food, listened to the same calm questions. Charlotte managed borrowed properties, converted rooms, set up spaces with the resourcefulness of someone who learns by doing, a massage table next to a notebook of goals, a water filter beside a lit candle, silence alongside steady footsteps. With patience, brick by brick, she expanded the structure, legalized documents, trained teams, created clear routines, wrote principles on the wall, presence, truth, responsibility. And when the next leap seemed impossible, the right opportunity appeared, an old boutique hotel, forgotten, beautiful yet weary at the same time. She stepped inside slowly, opened windows, let the light in, listened to the building breathe, and said yes. There, at last, she consolidated a place that didn't sell miracles, but grounding, a center built to rescue people, structure days, strip away excess, remind each person, gently yet firmly, who they really are. There were no cheap promises, but processes: wake up, hydrate, walk, work, talk, rest. And in the silence of the night, when the wind moved through the hallways, Charlotte knew that house healed because it gave back what the world so often steals: meaning. Charlotte learned, through pain, that life doesn't ask permission to test us, and when it seemed she had endured enough, the cruelest blow came. The loss of her daughter, taken by suicide, felt like her heart was ripped out while still alive. There were no answers, no immediate comfort, only a heavy silence settling in every corner of memory. As if that weren't enough, the death of her partner followed, taking away the shoulder she had leaned on so many times. These two voids could have dragged her back into the abyss, as before. But Charlotte was no longer the woman who once sought anesthesia in drugs. The transformation she achieved was not only physical, nor only mental, it was a healing of the heart, silent and profound. She cried until no tears were left, screamed when no one could hear, sat in silence when her strength was gone, but she did not fall back. She discovered that pain and love are intertwined threads, impossible to separate, and that living also means learning to walk with open scars. This journey brought her a definitive clarity: she no longer needed applause, approval, or praise to validate her existence. True freedom was in living with integrity, without negotiating her principles, without betraying herself just to fit into someone else's expectations. Honoring herself became her purest form of resistance. And so, day after day, Charlotte follows a simple but powerful compass: do only the next right thing. She doesn't overwhelm herself by trying to predict the future, nor does she freeze under the weight of the past. She just takes the next step, trusting that a greater force is guiding her path. This quiet trust became her fortress. Today, Charlotte is living proof that even when life insists on breaking us apart, there is still the possibility of being reborn, of rebuilding from within and remaining whole. The marks Charlotte carries on her body and soul are also proof of something she never hides: the devastating damage drugs inflict on a life. It's not only the loss of health, but the slow erosion of dignity, of relationships, of hope. Drugs steal dreams, hijack identities, and turn even memories into distorted shadows. Charlotte knows this because she lived each stage of that destruction, from the illusion of glamour to the bottom of tunnels where she once slept, not knowing if she would wake the next day. It was in that abyss that she learned her deepest lesson, forgiveness. Holding on to God, she took the first step by forgiving herself, acknowledging mistakes, stumbles, wrong turns, without torturing herself anymore. And by making peace with herself, she opened space to forgive others, those who hurt her, those who rejected her, even those who stole her childhood and innocence. That act of faith and release was what finally pulled her out of the victim mindset, giving her back the power to be the author of her own story. Today, Charlotte repeats a conviction that guides her days: nothing happens against us, but rather for us. Every loss, every fall, every pain can be transformed into learning, into direction, into strength. She learned that joy is no exclusive privilege, that we all carry both light and shadow, and that, in the end, we return to the same source, a place greater than any pain, where the meaning of life is revealed in love and compassion. That's why her mission now is not just to survive, but to offer a space for reconnection. Charlotte dedicates her life to reminding people that there is hope for anyone, even for those who once got lost in the darkest alleys of the cities. She herself is proof of this. The woman who once slept in tunnels, invisible and forgotten, now opens paths so others can find home within themselves, and discover that it's never too late to begin again. Charlotte's life shows that even after unimaginable losses and falls, faith in God, forgiveness, and the courage to start over can turn pain into strength and leave a legacy of hope for all of us. If you've made it this far, congratulations. It means you are truly committed to learning from Charlotte's journey, a woman who endured abandonment, abuse, drugs, devastating losses, and yet found in God, in forgiveness, and in resilience the strength to rise again. Her life is living proof that it's possible to rise from the ashes, as long as there is faith, courage, and the will to begin again. Through her story, we've seen profound lessons: forgiving yourself in order to forgive others, living with integrity even when no one applauds, turning pain into purpose, and realizing that true freedom begins when we stop being victims of the past. Charlotte proves to us that victory is not in never falling, but in choosing to rise and keep doing the next right thing. Today, after once sleeping in tunnels and walking through despair, she dedicates her life to helping others rediscover hope, reminding us that no one is beyond the reach of grace and healing. If forgiveness, faith, and courage were powerful enough to lift her out of such a deep abyss, imagine what these same principles could do for your own life. This channel is new and was created to inspire, showing that through real stories, like Charlotte's, it is possible to live with faith, courage, and purpose at any stage of life. Subscribe and continue with us on this journey.